In 1955, a 9-year-old boy walked 5 miles into the Tennessee woods alone. He carried a single pocket knife, 3 matches, and a small ball of waxed cotton. By sundown, he had built a shelter that kept him dry through a thunderstorm, started a fire on the first match, and snared a rabbit before going to sleep. His mother wasn't worried. She knew he'd be home for breakfast. Today, a 2018 study commissioned by Kamik found that the average modern child plays freely outdoors for less than 30 minutes a week. A landmark 1990 study called One False Move tracked roaming distance across generations and found that children today have 1/9 the territory their parents had at the same age. But here's what nobody talks about. The skills on this list weren't just for farm kids or scouts. They were drilled into ordinary American boys, in school gym class, in 4-H meetings, in church basements, until the 1970s, when liability premiums and zoning boards quietly scrubbed them from the curriculum. Number 14 was a Boy Scout requirement until the early 1970s and disappeared after a wave of insurance changes. Number 7 still appears almost word for word in the U.S. Army's official survival manual today, and number 3 was so common in 1958 that nearly every backyard in rural America had one. Hit subscribe, because what you're about to see was the foundation of a generation that built the interstate highway system, electrified rural America, and put a man on the moon. Let's count them down. A Barlow, a Case, or an old-timer, bought from the hardware store for about $1.50 in 1955. Your granddad would sit on the back porch with you, a pile of basswood between his boots, and show you the single rule that mattered. Always cut away from yourself. You learned to carve a whistle from a green willow branch, a spoon from a hickory knot, a little wooden chain from one solid stick. The shavings piled up around your sneakers like snow. By age 9, you could strip bark, point a marshmallow stick, and shape a fishing bobber without losing a finger. After the Gun-Free Schools Act of 1994 expanded zero-tolerance policies, school districts across the country began suspending children for bringing pocket knives to class. By the early 2000s, 6-year-olds were getting expelled for show and tell. Your great-grandfather carried his knife to 3rd grade. Nobody died. Nobody even got hurt. Number 19. Starting a one-match fire. The Boy Scout handbook called it the one-match fire, and it was a rite of passage at every summer camp from Maine to Montana. Your dad taught you the structure. Tinder first, a fluffy nest of dried grass or birch bark shaved thin. Kindling next, pencil-sized twigs snapped from the dead lower branches of a standing pine. Fuel would last, built into a teepee around the whole thing. The rule was strict. You got one strike, anywhere match, the kind diamonds sold in a red and blue box for 9 cents. And if your fire went out, you slept cold. Kids learned to read the wood, to keep dry tinder in a tin in their pocket, to shield the flame with a cupped hand. A 10-year-old in 1962 could light a fire in a drizzle. Ask a college freshman today to do it with a butane lighter, and half of them give up. Number 18. Tying the 4 essential knots. Square knot, bowline, clove hitch, and taut line hitch. These were drilled into you by Cub Scouts, by 4-H, by your uncle, by the older kid down the block who knew things. You practiced on your shoelaces, on a length of clothesline tied to the porch rail, on the braided cord of your pajama bottoms. The square knot joined 2 ropes of equal thickness. The bowline made a loop that never slipped, even when 1,000 pounds pulled on it. The clove hitch tied a rope to a post in 3 seconds. The taut line hitch tightened a tent guideline without slack. You needed them for everything. Lashing a sled to the roof of the station wagon, rigging a tire swing, building a raft out of 2x4s. A Cub Scout at age 8 could tie all 4 blindfolded. Today, most adults cannot tie their shoes without double knotting them and hoping. Scout camp taught declination, that crucial difference between magnetic north and true north that depends on where you are standing. You learn to orient the map to the landscape, thumbs pointing where you stood, landmarks lining up. A topo map cost 50 cents at any ranger station in the 1960s. You folded it into a waxed paper sleeve and tucked it into your shirt pocket. When the satellites blink out someday, and they will, The handful of people who still remember declination are going to be the only ones who can find their way home. Morel mushrooms in April, honeycombed and hollow, growing near dead elms. Sassafras roots, dug up and boiled for tea that tasted like root beer. Persimmons, which you never ate before the first frost, or your mouth would pucker for 45 minutes. Pawpaws, wild grapes, ramps, dandelion greens, cattail roots. The USDA published farmers' bulletins on wild plants for decades, and most rural 10-year-olds knew at least 30 edible species by sight. Today, fewer than 3% of Americans can reliably identify poison ivy. Our grandparents could tell you which leaf made tea and which one would put you in a hospital before lunch. Number 15. Cleaning and filleting a fish. You caught your first bluegill at 6, and your dad handed you the fish and a paring knife and walked away. Scale first, tail toward you, knife scraping against the grain until the iridescent little discs flew everywhere, sticking to your forearms and the kitchen sink. Slit the belly from vent to gill. Scoop the guts into a coffee can for the garden. Cut the head off at the pectoral fin. For bigger fish, bass, walleye, perch, you learn the fillet, sliding the blade along the spine, peeling the meat away from the ribs in one clean motion. Your mother would not let you come inside until you were done. A 10-year-old in 1958 cleaned a stringer of 12 fish in 15 minutes flat. Today, most adults buy salmon in shrink-wrapped pink rectangles and have no idea that a whole animal once came before that plastic tray. Number 14. Building a lean-to shelter from what the woods gave you. Lean-to construction was on page 47 of the 1948 Boy Scout Handbook, and every kid who earned the Wilderness Survival Merit Badge could throw one up in under an hour. Find 2 trees about 7 feet apart. Lash a crossbar between them at shoulder height. Lean long branches against the crossbar at a 45-degree angle. Weave smaller branches through the frame. Then came the real work, shingling the whole thing with pine boughs layered like roof tiles, tips pointing down so rain ran off. A good lean-to kept you dry through a thunderstorm. A great one held body heat through a 30-degree night. Kids practiced in the backyard on Saturdays, dragging branches out of the woods behind the subdivision. Today, wilderness schools charge over $1,000 for a weekend workshop teaching the same skill. Your grandfather learned it at age 10 from a dog-eared handbook that cost 75 cents. You filtered debris through a bandana stretched across the mouth of your canteen. Then you boiled it in a tin cup over the fire you made with your one match. Here's what modern hikers forget. A stream that looks pristine can carry Giardia, Cryptosporidium, and a dozen other microorganisms that will turn your guts inside out for a week. Your grandfather knew without being told that you never drank from water that did not move. Today, the CDC confirms that boiling for 1 minute kills nearly all biological contaminants. People pay $70 for a life straw. A 10-year-old in 1961 knew that a rolling boil in a coffee can did the same job. Farm kids knew cumulus clouds meant fair weather. Cumulonimbus meant you had 30 minutes to get the hay in. A high, thin veil of cirrus meant rain within 48 hours. You watched the wind. A shift from south to west in August meant a cold front and a thunderstorm before supper. You watched the animals. Cows lying down in the pasture. Birds flying low. Leaves showing their silver undersides as the pressure dropped. The Old Farmer's Almanac, first published in 1792, still sells over 1 million copies a year, and every rural kitchen had one hanging on a nail by the back door. Today, we have Doppler radar, and we still get caught in the rain. To bridle and saddle a quarter horse that weighed 1,100 pounds without flinching when he stamped. You milked dairy cows before school, your forehead pressed against the warm flank, squeezing in that strange rolling rhythm that took weeks to learn. You mucked stalls, forked hay, slopped hogs, and collected eggs from under hens that pecked the back of your hand hard enough to bleed. By age 10, a farm kid could handle a steer 3 times his weight and a tractor with a manual transmission. That's not nostalgia. According to the U.S. Census, in 1960, around 30% of American children grew up rural, with daily chores involving animals that could hurt them if they were careless. The kids learned, the animals taught. The skills coming up were taught to children. and the legal infrastructure to ban them didn't exist yet. You split stovewood on a chopping block, standing the log on end and bringing the axe down in a clean arc. For tough rounds, you used a splitting maul and a steel wedge. A 10-year-old with decent form could split a face cord in an afternoon. Here's what surprises people today. National Safety Council data from the period showed axe injuries among rural children were vanishingly rare compared to bicycle injuries, skateboard injuries, or playground falls. Teaching a kid to handle an axe correctly was statistically safer than sending him to recess. We forgot that. Now we pay strangers $40 a bundle for firewood at the gas station. You learned the 20-degree angle, visualized as the stone beneath and the spine of the blade raised about the thickness of 2 dimes. You learned to pull the knife across the stone, edge first, like you were slicing a thin layer off the top of the rock. 15 passes on each side, then strop it on a leather belt to polish the edge. A properly sharpened pocket knife shaved the hair off your forearm. A dull knife was an insult to your own upbringing. Today, people send their kitchen knives to mail-order sharpening services or throw them away and buy new ones. A 10-year-old in 1963 had a blade sharper than most professional chefs do today, maintained with a rock and a strip of leather. The American Red Cross Junior Life-Saving Certification, a program in continuous operation since 1914, was a standard requirement in 5th grade in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. You learned the dead man's float, face down, arms spread, lifting your head only to breathe, conserving energy for hours. You learned to tread water for 10 minutes without touching the side of the pool. You learned how to approach a drowning victim from behind, never the front, because a panicked swimmer will climb you like a ladder and drown you both. You learned to strip off your jeans underwater, tie the legs into a knot, and inflate them as a makeshift life vest. Schools dropped swim programs in the 1980s as insurance premiums rose and pools closed. According to the CDC's 2024 Vital Signs report, more than 54% of American adults today have never taken a swimming lesson. The American Red Cross reports that 64% of African American children and 40% of white children have few to no swimming skills. We traded a life skill for a legal memo. Number 7. First aid and basic field medicine. The American Red Cross Junior First Aid Certification was a Scout requirement, a 4-H requirement, and a standard home economics topic for both girls and boys. By age 12, you knew how to pick a splinter out with a sterilized needle, clean a cut with soap and water and hydrogen peroxide, apply a butterfly bandage made from tape, and splint a broken finger with a popsicle stick. You knew the signs of shock: pale, cold, clammy skin, and a rapid pulse, and to elevate the feet and keep the person warm. You knew the Heimlich maneuver after Dr. Henry Heimlich published it in 1974, and every school cafeteria in America had a poster showing the fist thrust. You knew not to move someone with a suspected spinal injury. You knew a tourniquet was a last resort. A 12-year-old in 1972 could keep a friend alive until the ambulance got there, which in rural America was sometimes 45 minutes away. The U.S. Army's Field Manual on Survival, FM 2176, still contains nearly identical instruction today. Most modern adults freeze and dial 911. Copper wire about 18 gauge bent into a loop with a slip knot, set in the runway where rabbit tracks press the grass flat. You learned to read the sign: droppings, chewed twigs, the little tunnels through the brush, deadfall traps for squirrels, figure 4 triggers whittled from sticks, a flat rock balanced above a baited scrap of apple. By the early 20th century, a kid in rural Arkansas could bring home 3 rabbits a week. At 10 cents a pound in 1940, that was 40 cents. Real money for a family. Fur-Fish Game magazine, founded in 1925, taught millions of American boys how to read animal signs, skin a muskrat, and stretch a hide on a board. The magazine is still in print, but its readership has collapsed. The knowledge is still there in the back issues, and almost nobody reads them. Not just skills, the wiring that makes a person resilient. Peeling peaches with your fingers after they had been dipped in boiling water and the skin slipped right off. Wiping the rims of jars with a vinegar rag before the lids went on. You learned the pressure canner rule: 10 pounds, 25 minutes for green beans, or someone gets botulism. You learned the water bath canner for anything acidic: You learned that a lid that didn't seal, that popped up when you pressed the center, was a failed jar that had to be refrigerated and eaten that week. According to USDA records, Victory Gardens in 1944 produced roughly 40% of fresh vegetables consumed in the United States. By 1970, the average American household had a freezer. Today, the average household has DoorDash. Number 4. Navigating by sun and stars. By the 1970s, schools had quietly replaced this with rote memorization of state capitals. But up through the 1960s, every Boy Scout learned to find true north at night using the Big Dipper. Find the 2 stars at the end of the ladle, the pointer stars. Draw an imaginary line through them, extended about 5 times the distance between them, and you hit Polaris, the North Star. Polaris never moves. It sits within 1 degree of true north year-round. During the day, you learn to tell time by driving a stick into the ground and watching the shadow, a shadow stick compass. A Kentucky farm kid in 1955 could walk out of the woods at midnight, find the Big Dipper, and walk home in a straight line. The U.S. Air Force still teaches this technique to its survival evasion students today. Ordinary American children learned it from a paperback handbook that cost $1. Inhale, exhale halfway, hold, squeeze. You learned sight alignment. The front post centered in the rear notch, level at the top. The Fred Bear recurve bow taught you archery at archery camps that ran in every state park. A slingshot cost nothing. You cut a Y-fork from a dogwood branch, strapped on 2 lengths of surgical tubing from your mother's medical kit, and a leather pouch from an old shoe tongue. A kid in 1968 with a slingshot could hit a Coke can at 30 feet 9 times out of 10. The skill was in the practice. The practice was in the backyard. The backyard is gone. Your mother kept a small wooden box on the shelf with needles in 3 sizes, spools of black, white, and brown thread, a thimble, and a small scissors. When your jeans tore at the knee, you didn't throw them away. You patched them with a piece of denim cut from an older pair and tacked it down with whip stitches. A button could be replaced in 5 minutes. A torn pocket fixed in 10. A hem let down twice as your legs grew through the school year. Today, the average American throws away around 80 pounds of clothing per year, much of it for damage that could be repaired with a needle and 10 minutes of attention. The needle still costs $0.25. We just stopped picking it up. In 1979, the geographer Roger Hart published Children's Experience of Place, a landmark study of children in a small Vermont town. He documented that children aged 6 to 10 routinely roamed up to a mile or more from their homes, alone, on foot, exploring fields, creeks, woods, and back roads. Mom sent you out after breakfast with a peanut butter sandwich and a paper bag. You came home when the streetlights came on. You got lost. You got bored. You solved your own problems. You built forts, crossed creeks, climbed trees higher than your mother would have allowed if she had known. When you fell and skinned your knee, you didn't cry for her. You packed it with mud, tied a bandana around it, and kept going. A 1990 British study called One False Move by Mayor Hillman found that within a single generation, the roaming distance of children had collapsed by roughly 9/10. Today, the average 12-year-old's free roam radius is what researchers call the backyard. Smartphones with location tracking ensure that mothers can see their children at all times. Something broke somewhere. You cannot teach a child to survive if you never let him out of sight long enough to try. Every skill on this list, from the pocket knife to the Polaris fix, rested on this one foundation. Parents trusted kids. Kids figured it out. And the country that produced those kids won 2 world wars, electrified itself, and walked on the moon. Just one. Teach it to a kid in your life this week. Show them how to tie a bowline. Take them outside on a clear night and find the Big Dipper together. Hand them a small folding knife and a stick of basswood, and tell them the only rule that matters: always cut away from yourself. Then come back and tell me in the comments which skill you're passing down. I want to see which one of these still has the most life left in it. Because these weren't party tricks. They were the bedrock of an entire generation. And we let it go in less than 50 years. Your great-grandfather knew. Now you know too.